Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar series with PastPerfect 5.0. We're going to be talking today about protecting your PastPerfect database. This is a really important topic and one about which we all feel very passionate here around the office. So we're very glad that you're able to take some time out of your day to join us. So let's go ahead and get started then. So a brief explanation of what we hope to accomplish today. The webinar will cover both theoretical situations as well as practical applications. So once we finish with the presentation for the first part of our webinar today, we'll move into the evaluation software and talk about how to actually put these backup utilities into place. So we'll show you some ways and some scenarios that data loss can occur, as well as what you can do to make sure that it doesn't happen, ways that you can put preventive measures into place. And then finally, it will help you take steps to recover if and when disaster does occur. So we're hoping to move through these different goals for our webinar today, and we'll show you different scenarios now coming up. One of the more common causes of data loss is through hard drive failure. So if the server or the main computer crashes, you might lose all the data that was on the drive. And not just your PastPerfect data. If you are saving your large archival TIFF images to the server, if you have company docs or documents that you share with your colleagues, even personal files or backup emails, all of these, if they're on the server drive, can potentially be lost if it gets damaged, if it burns out, or any number of things happen to make it fail. Server backups might not always capture all the information that was on the drive to begin with. Sometimes they're programmed to only capture certain folders, they're only programmed to be incremental in what it captures, and it might only capture files that have been recently updated. So it doesn't always equate to a complete backup of what exactly was on the drive originally. And we also can't rely just on server backups for PastPerfect. So there's other ways and other measures that you can take to make sure that you're protected in the event of a server or a hard drive crash. So one of these is making hard drive backups on your local computer. And so this is one option that you can take that will help you recover if you do experience a server crash or a hard drive failure. So your first line of defense and a minimum standard for protection should be the hard drive backup. Now, we recommend that you make a backup of data to hard drive every day that you work in the program. If you're on a network, that means that the program and the backups are local to your computer, but that the data is elsewhere. It's on the server or the main desktop computer, and that you're likely connected to several other computers that may also have PastPerfect on it. Now that's a great situation because that means that you have opportunities to make backups in multiple places. And if you are on a network, make backups on different computers, on different days, by different users. So that way, if the server does crash, or even one of those network workstations does crash, you have recovery options available very easily to obtain on the local workstations, your computer or other ones on the network. But if you're on a standalone computer, your program and backups are going to be local to your machine as well as the data. So that means everything that you have is on that one computer. So we still want you to make hard drive backups every day that you work, but it's going to become even more important if you're a standalone or a single computer that you have another source for making backups. So hard drive backups are great, but let's see what other options there are. And these take the form of those removable backups. So whether you call them flash drives or jump drives or thumbsticks, or whether you have the bigger external hard drives that just sit on your desktop and stay there, these external devices are easy to use and they're fairly inexpensive. They go on sale several times a year, so it's easy to go to even big box stores and pick up a handful of them. We recommend that you make these removable drive backups every week or so that you work in the program. And these will capture not only your data, but also the images and multimedia as well. So because you're making a complete backup of the program or a complete backup of all of your data, you're going to make sure that you have enough storage space on that device. So you need to make sure that your complete backup is going to be smaller than the total size of the flash drive or external hard drive that you have available. One other thing to consider is that when you do make these removable drive backups, you're going to overwrite the existing one that's on that device. It can only keep one external backup at a time on any particular device. So that's why we suggest go to the store, grab a handful of them, and then rotate among 3 or 4 of them. So that way you're not immediately overwriting your most recent backup that you've made. You have a little bit of time that you can maybe have 3 or 4 weeks worth of a time range there to go back in case you need anything to refer to. One other recommendation that we have in terms of these removable devices is that we don't recommend that you keep them connected to your computer if you're not actively using them. So if you're not making a removable drive backup, or if you're not saving files to it, or getting files from it, just make sure they're ejected, make sure they're unplugged and accessible to you, but we don't want you to leave them connected to your computer, and you'll see why in just a second. So unfortunately, there's another cause of data loss out there, and this is more malicious in nature, and that's malware and ransomware. So these are viruses. These are software programs that come in from an external source, and they can infect your programs and your files that are on your computer and on your network system. So the best way to prevent this is still common sense. Don't download any files or open attachments or emails that you don't trust, either from people or places or sites that you don't feel comfortable opening. It's much better just to skip over it than to risk opening your computer up to a virus in this manner. There's also a new type of virus or malware called ransomware. So this is still a virus, and it still infects your files and it makes them unreadable. But in this situation, it takes the additional step of leaving a ransom note behind, if you will, and in the hopes that you will pay these ransom malware developers a ransom to get your files back. So we don't actually recommend that you go down this avenue in order to get your files back. And if you're making frequent backups in different ways, you already have good recovery options, so you don't even have to consider this ransom or to meet the demands of this cybercrime, if you will. And unfortunately, we have seen way too many of these viruses hit our clients lately, and it's even in the news on other computer systems. And they can affect your PastPerfect in different ways. One of the more common ways and a big indication that you have been hit with a virus is when you see these error number 15s, not a table. This is PastPerfect's way of communicating to you that this data table is completely corrupted. It is unreadable. PastPerfect doesn't know what to do with it, and it cannot open it. And it's possible that only one data table has been corrupted, some of them, or even all of the dozens of data tables that PastPerfect works with. So that error 15 is definitely not a good thing that you want to see. But if you've been hit by these ransomware type viruses, you're going to notice that your files look a little bit different as well. You'll notice that there's probably additional files that are now in place on your system called something like recover, recovery, help recover, something along that lines. And these are those ransom notes or that ransom instruction for you to hopefully follow and give them lots of money, and then they'll get your files back. So again, if you see these in your data folder or in other places on your system, again, this is a clue to let us know and let you know that something in the way of a malware has hit your system. Other things that you might notice is that the software programs that once recognized and could work with these file types are now disassociated. So these DBF and FPT files that PastPerfect normally can open and work with just fine are now disassociated because your computer, your actual operating system, doesn't recognize them. In this screenshot here, we can see that it thinks it's a locked file, that it's not associating it as a data table or a PastPerfect file, that it's been locked and PastPerfect can't open it. Your computer doesn't even know what to do with it. In some cases, it might misassociate a file type. We've seen PastPerfect backups be corrupted to the point where your computer thinks it's an MP3 file, something crazy like that. So viruses and crash drives, like we've talked about, can both be very damaging and can both result in data loss. But viruses can be even potentially more damaging than a crash drive because they can jump across the network. So even if your computer wasn't the one that was originally hit by the virus, if you're connected to that computer across the network, then it can potentially work its way across that network connection to the files on your computer and infect your files as well. So it's not just one computer that can potentially be hit, it could be all of them as well. And like I said, it does also have the possibility of hitting those removable drives that you have plugged into your computer because they're just another extension of a network connection or another drive that your computer recognizes. So that's really one of the big reasons we don't recommend leaving them plugged in all the time. And like I mentioned, PastPerfect files are affected in these situations, but also non-PastPerfect files. So we've seen PDFs and JPEGs that have been corrupted beyond the point where other software applications can open them as well. And unfortunately, PastPerfect backups are vulnerable too to this corruption. So we'll talk about different levels of backup solutions as well. This is why it's so important to have a series of these backup solutions, not relying on just one source to have your data protected. So you might be hit by technological disasters, but you also could be hit by natural disasters or even human disasters as well. So you could be at risk of fire or flood. So that means your whole building might potentially be damaged, as well as your computer system and as well as the backups that you had on site. It can be absolutely debilitating on many levels. But you also have to account for human error in the accidental deletion of files off of the computer or even records themselves in PastPerfect. And you have to be aware of the reinstallation of programs or even entire operating systems. And you also have to be cautious of the potential theft or damage to these portable devices. So these laptops and these flash drives and external hard drives that we've been talking about are great. They're very convenient to use, but they're also easy to pick up and walk away. Plus, because they're so portable and easy to use, they're also more susceptible to being damaged. They're very easy to drop, to sit on, to step on, or to otherwise damage the computer and the contents of that computer and the drive beyond what is recoverable. So fortunately, there's another choice in your backup regimens, and those are disk backups. So we're talking now about CD and DVD backups. And these are very inexpensive. They're really just pennies each in a bundle. And they're great because they provide you an optical resource. These are non-magnetic, so they can't accidentally be erased the same way magnetic media can. And once you write to them, they can't be overwritten or corrupted by viruses. So even if you do have a CD or DVD RW, a rewritable drive, we recommend that you only use the disks one time so that when you make your backup, you burn it and then put it to the side. And then when you go to make your next disk backup, start with a fresh disk each time. That way your data is as safe and complete as possible. And again, because they're so inexpensive, you don't have to worry about wasting a lot of time and money making these backups. But also good because they don't wear out quickly. So unless you're popping them in and out of your disk drive and accessing the files on them constantly, they do have the potential to last for quite a long time in the future. And they're good because they let you start an archive of your backup. So you can have multiple disks sitting on your shelf or somewhere else that could go back months, maybe even years of data. And so if there is ever any question about what you once had in your collection or the discrepancy in data, we can work with you and obtain those older backups to get to the bottom of the situation. So we definitely can work with an archive of backups. And again, because they're so easy and portable and inexpensive, you can easily take them off-site for a further level of protection. So you can burn a backup, send it home with your board presidents, put it in your bank vault, even put it in a mailer and send it across the country to a partner museum. Maybe you want to start a reciprocal relationship with a museum that's outside of your geographic area. That way, if disasters do strike one or the other organization, you know that there's another site that has your back, and then they can provide you with your own data if and when you need to recover from it. So there is another type of offsite backup that you might be familiar with. And these, again, are good in addition to these other backup utilities that we've been talking about. So like server backups, these cloud-based systems should not be your only line of defense. They should not be the only way you're backing up your data. So sites like Carbonite and Mozy can be great tools, and the big if here is if they are set up and if they are monitored and managed properly and constantly, then they might provide you with another option to use in your backup recovery system. But they work best with PastPerfect when they back up copies of your data that you've made through other backup utilities. Since PastPerfect needs full control over all of its files when you're using the program, avoiding continuous or real-time scanning by these other programs will help you avoid errors in PastPerfect, which is always a good thing. So again, these backups that are cloud-based have a potential to be your friends, but you really do need to continually set them up and monitor them properly. You don't want them accidentally backing up old information after you've upgraded, for example, or backing up on a workstation rather than the main computer or anything like that. So again, they do take work to manage properly. They might help you, but definitely don't rely on them for just a one-time backup protection. So we've been talking a little bit about different worst-case scenarios, and unfortunately, we do have to work with clients to recover lost data after crashed drives or viruses or even a combination of all these disasters. One of the worst parts of our job is to have to tell clients that they have to go back to data that's 2 years old or even more because no other backups were made, and they now have to redo 2 years worth of their hard work because there's no other backups. So the bottom line is this: your data is too important and your time is too valuable to have this happen to you. You might not be able to prevent the disaster from happening, but you can help what comes next, and that's the recovery process. So we want you to call us when you have a disaster or when you need help. Even if you don't have support, we want to help you. We'll work with you, your IT, other users to figure out what happens, what backups you have available, and what the plan going forward should be. We understand that this is a terrible situation that you're facing and that you're going through, but we don't want you to make it worse by acting in haste and trying to quickly restore an old backup or work very quickly just to get back up and running again. But if you do experience a disaster and you've been making all of these backups as we recommend that you do, you're going to have really good recovery options so that you can very quickly and easily, in a matter of very little time, get your entire system and PastPerfect back up and running again. So now let's take a look at the software and walk through some of these options that we've been talking about. So here's an introduction to some of the backup utilities that are in PastPerfect 5.0. So I'm going to switch over to the evaluation software. And this will take us right to the main menu. And let's review some of the common questions that we get here and just do a brief review of our backup recommendations. So one of the most common questions that we get is, how often should I do a backup? But the question is probably more appropriately asked is this: how much work do I want to do again if disaster does happen? And so that'll kind of help you have a different mindset of making your backup procedures. So again, our basic recommendation is that every day you work in the program, you make a hard drive backup. And you do that by clicking on Hard Drive Backup here on the main menu, and then clicking Backup Data to Hard Drive. And you see when I do that, it's going to very quickly create a compressed zip file, and that's going to take a copy of the data folder. Remember when we talked earlier about the data folder being located either on the network server or on your standalone computer? No matter where it's located, it's going to take a copy of that and put that shrinked, compressed copy in the backup folder. So if you say OK to that, you'll see that it's going to record the date and the time and the size, which is great information for you. Again, if you ever need to recover or go back to a certain point in time, you're going to have this information. If you're on a network and you have enough free space, you can also make a backup of images and multimedia to the hard drive. PastPerfect is programmed to keep 30 of these hard drive backups in its backup folder before it overwrites the oldest one. And if I click on the Backup Information button, you'll see that it expands to show you the information for 11 through 30 and for additional system-wide backups as well. We encourage you to make backups to your hard drive as often as you need to. Don't feel like you can only make a hard drive backup once a day. In fact, you should make it before you make big changes to your program. So if you're updating locations, if you're getting ready to import information or run a program update or do a re-index, these are all great ways and times for you to make a hard drive backup before you make any of these big changes. And if you're making these regular backups, you're, again, going to have 30 of these backups in your backup folder before you have to overwrite the oldest one. And so that's great. So you potentially have 4, maybe even 6 weeks worth of hard drive backups in your backup folder. And these are, again, very accessible and easy to use and to recover from. So again, that's why it's so great to make these hard drive backups. They're very quick to do, very easy to recover, and to get us these backups in case we have to work with you to do that. So I'm going to exit from here, and we're going to talk about the removable backup. So again, we're going to click on Removable Backup from the main screen. And you can see that this will allow you to make a complete backup, data, images, and multimedia. And the key here is to make sure that the backup drive and listed in PastPerfect is the same one that your computer thinks it is. So I just plugged in my flash drive here, and if I open it in Windows Explorer, you can see that it actually thinks it's drive E, not G. So all I need to do is switch back to PastPerfect and simply make that change. So I'll just change that to E:, and that's all I need to do. Then you just click Start Backup and let PastPerfect do its thing. It's going to compress the data folder again and then start working through images and then multimedia in that order. Now, it can take a little while to complete because, again, you're making a complete backup of all of your information, but it's definitely worth the time that it's going to take making these backups. These backups can potentially save a lot more time and trouble than having to redo or lose 2 months, years worth of your hard work by taking just a few minutes to make these backups. Now, disk backups also work in a similar way. They let you make a backup to data, images, and multimedia. And if you have a larger data set, you might find that all of your data can't fit on one disk. And that's okay. PastPerfect is flexible enough to allow you to check and uncheck the subfolders. And you can see that this total size here is changing. So that when you do make these disk backups, you can do them in batches. Check the folders you need, let that burn and complete, put in a new disk, and then do your second batch and continue in that manner until all of your data is backed up. So that's a little look at our backup utilities and our presentation for today. What I'm going to do now is, before we take a look at the questions and answers, I want to stop the recording. So I just wanted to say, again, thank you for joining us today. We hope this webinar has given you more information about the backup process and what you can do to keep your data safe and recover after a disaster. It wasn't meant to scare or intimidate you. Well, maybe a little, maybe just scaring you just a little bit into reviewing at least your backup procedure and what you do now and what you can do differently. But we want to educate you and empower you because we want you to be a responsible and confident PastPerfect user. So please don't hesitate to call us or email us after the webinar if you have any follow-up questions to what we talked about today, or if you do have any trouble making a backup, we'll be more than happy to help you. We're in the office Monday to Friday, 9 to 5:30 here on the East Coast, and you're welcome to call our toll-free number or email us at support@museumsoftware.com. So I'm going to stop the recording now, but thanks again for joining us. We hope you have a great rest of your day.